Hello and welcome to week 6 of the ARK map creation series. In this video, we're going to talk about rocks and trees and how to place them and how to make it so they can be harvested. I sort of want to lay out a roadwork of what we're going to do over the next 3 videos. In this video, we're going to talk about destructible meshes, and in the next video, we're going to talk about using multiple levels to reduce load time. And in the third video, we're going to talk about how we create some inland water and some of the unique waterfalls that you can find in the maps throughout ARK. With that said, let's get started on destructible meshes. Now, ARK uses the Unreal Engine 4 Foliage Tool to paint some of these destructible meshes onto the landscape. So, with our landscape selected, we can hit our Foliage Tool, and it'll bring up this window. And I picked this extreme angle to sort of show you what this tool looks like. You can see that it's sort of like a paintbrush, but not quite. It's got a little bit of a dome. And this is because it uses a normalized curve to determine density within this circle. And that's a really fancy way to say that it puts more things closer to the center than it does to the outside. Now with this paint circle out, we can paint any destructible meshes we want as long as we set them up here in this top left area. And you can see right here in the thing, it says drag static meshes from your content browser into this area. So what we want to do if we're importing a tree is we want to search for oak or pine, or I haven't gone through all the different trees, but whatever tree you really want to import, you're going to find this tree. So I want to find the oak tree. In this case, it's called hammock oak _SM. And we're going to drag it up into this area. And one thing that ARK wants you to do is use some settings that they've predetermined. You can change these settings, but they want you to use shared settings. You can see right here it says not using shared settings. So the easy way to do that is just to select it down here. So we have our hammock oak SM. Down here, our foliage settings, hammock oak SM _settings. We're just going to select that down here in the content browser, and then come up here and click this button that says use the instance foliage settings currently selected in the content browser. That's this hammock oak one. We hit yep, and it imports all those settings. The one thing it doesn't do, however, is import the instance settings, which you can see are still on default. But that's a pretty easy fix. We only need to double click our hammock oak SM settings, and we just need to go down to the important bits, which people on the forums, small plug here for the ARK forums, click this button at the top, you'll go to the ARK dev kit forums. People are extremely helpful there, but they've tipped me off that this clustering is pretty important and doesn't copy over. So this process will be fairly similar for the rock, but for the tree, there's a couple key differences. We need to essentially copy everything that's in this clustering phase over to this. So that means checking this and rebuilding a class hierarchy construct. That's going to take some time because the ARK dev kit is slow. Now once this loads, this damaged FX actor spawn, we want to find the tree harvest impact emitter. And if we just type tree, we'll see tree harvest impact emitter is right here. All these settings are okay. For the attached component class, we want this tree to give wood when harvest. So we want to type, we want to type wood harvest component, and that's it. We don't need a destroyed mesh for trees. We will need one for a rock, but for a tree they just kind of fall down, which is why we'll check is falling tree. We're just going to set both of these to 2 real quick, and what we want to do when we hit it, since it's a falling tree, we want to set up tree falling blueprint to run when the mesh actor is destroyed. Finally, we want to create 2 elements in this override destruction materials, and we want to copy this, and we want to do this in a particular order. Element 0 needs to be the trunk of the tree. Element 1 will always be the leaves of the tree. So whether you're doing a palm tree or a pine or an oak, the trunk always comes before the foliage or the leaves in this element array. So for element 0 right here, we need this to be the oak trunk. So I'm just going to search hammock oak and MIC faded. And here, hammock oak, we want foliage leaves MIC faded. The last thing we want to do, since most of these are correct, is just to make sure that we receive decals on rendering. This will just help with the rendering engine that Unreal uses. It doesn't really matter, but you'll see better performance if this is checked. I should say, this is fairly important, extremely important. Our collision for our trees, we want them to be block all, right? We want them to block every type of movement, but we still want to be able to harvest the trees. And what that means is when we punch at a tree or when we swing something at a tree, that IK animation needs to interact with the tree. So there's actually a collision preset called block all except IK. You don't really need to know what it means, but IK is an animation type, and they're just referencing the harvest punch or the harvest swing of an axe. So now, when we come back to our paint thing, we just simply need to make sure that this bit right here is checked. We can hit hide details to get rid of our instance, our painting details. We just want to be painting this tree. We can set our paint density, our brush size, any of that jazz, and when you just click, it fills this circle, pending your density. So if I want a higher density, when I click, more trees are going to fill in here. If I want a lower density, obviously, fewer trees are going to show up. You can click and drag. You can just click individually for a single tree. If you set your brush size to about 800 to 1000 and put your density around 0.15, this is generally what I find works to place an individual thing. Sometimes you have to click a few times or click and drag just a smidgen, but this will let you place it in a specific spot. So if I want this tree on this little ledge here next to these basalt columns, then I just click right there, and lo and behold, we have a tree there. Now all of these trees, they're all foliage materials. They're instance foliage actors. And they've all have the settings that we set in this foliage instance settings. All of these trees should hurt us and give us wood when we hit it. And if we hit it enough, it should eventually fall over. So if we hit play, and it loads, we can do a cheat to give infinite stats so I don't kill myself. And we can sprint over to the trees. And we'll find that I can't run through them. That is loud. Very, very loud. But when I punch it, I take damage, and you can see over on the left side, I'm getting thatch. And the tree falls over once it's been completely removed. So that's half of what we're trying to do today. We've done our trees. Now what we really need to do is set up some rocks so that when we want to harvest stone and or metal or crystal, that type of thing, we can do so. In order to do the rocks on this level, we're going to do a similar method, but it's slightly different, as I mentioned, mostly due to the destructible mesh. So if we go back out to our game thing and then go down here to this ultimate rocks folder and then into meshes, we can find that these are most of the rocks that they use for general gathering within ARK. I'm going to set up one of these just to show a proof of concept on how to set them up, but the process is the same for setting up all the different rocks that are destructible meshes in the game. So I'm going to do Ultimate Rock 6, and this is important. I need the Ultimate Rock 6 static mesh, the Ultimate Rock 6 destructible mesh, and the Ultimate Rock 6 settings. So just like before, I'm going to drag it up here. Once it's up here, we need to import the settings that ARK uses. So I go down here to Ultimate Rock 6 settings, come up to this little button again, use instant foliage settings, click that, and it's going to import the settings from this. However, once again, we know that not everything copies over. So we need to go to show instance settings, and we're going to come down here to clustering, and we have to change some stuff. So most of this is pretty much the same. Now we need to make sure that our damage FX actor to spawn is set to stone harvest, impact emitter. And unlike trees, this is a little bit different. We want to set a max scale here. And this is so the ARK game, after you harvest rocks and it's procedurally spawning them back into your level, it spawns in different rocks at different shapes, different rotations, but we have to give it a max scale here. And I'll use this to talk a little bit about what each of these components does. So the scale factor here is really just a multiplier. This is something that you can change in the server settings, in ARK Server Manager or something of the sort. If you want your rocks to be super large, then I guess by all means jump this up. Lower creates smaller rocks. Minimum scale is the smallest possible rock that can appear, and it's important to note that 0 does not mean a rock that doesn't exist. It's just 0 as in like an index on an array. It's index 0. The smallest possible one is just a small rock. It's not a non-existent rock. This max instances per cluster is if you want to control a lower spawn rate, and a max cluster radius determines the size of the clusters of these rocks that are spawned in. So we don't actually want to change any of these pretty much, because we want this map to be somewhat close to a vanilla map, and any changes we make when we play it will be done on the server settings side, not the map side. So here on the attached component class, we want the stone harvest component right there. And this is where we deviate from trees. We want to import the destroyed mesh, and you can click here to drop down a search. So if we want the ultimate rock, Ultimate Rock 06, we can find it this way, or we can just come down here, click on this thing in the content browser, which is our destructible mesh for Ultimate Rock 06, then come back up here and click this little arrow, and it pulls in our asset from below. It's whichever way you prefer to do it. Doesn't matter to me. Just knock yourself out. For our destroyed mesh actor, we need to just copy this destroyed mesh basics, ignore self. It's just what rocks need. And then we need to have a walkable floor, which is 0.4. This is not a falling tree. We don't need to destroy materials, so we'll skip on past this and get all the way back down to collision, which needs to be block all, and it needs to receive decals. All right, so now that we have our rock, we're going to uncheck our tree, and just like before, we're going to click to paint. So you can see that these rocks are spawning in at different rotations. It's the same rock, mind you. We haven't put 3 rocks. We can have multiple things selected, make a giant size, and it'll paint multiple things with enough density. So for some reason the trees don't want to spawn up here. That might be a landscape setting. I'll have to look into that. But down over here where the trees and the rocks can spawn, you can see that I just spawned a tree and a rock in the same click because both are selected. Now this is pretty valuable because when we're doing biomes, we want the biomes to spawn in the biomes, and that includes all the trees that fit in a biome. So if I was doing the beach, I might want those round smooth rocks that you sometimes see on rivers in ARK, and palm trees, and perhaps some small brush that you can harvest berries from. In our next episode, we're going to talk about map management and how we make it less intensive on the computer by utilizing shared maps through the window of levels, which is over here. Right now we only have one persistent level. We're going to utilize several levels to create a level which is less computer intensive than just one large level that has everything on it. And after that, we'll hit up waterfalls and all that fun stuff. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. I'm more than happy to help. Like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell, all that jazz. And hopefully we'll see you next week.